Hi there, it's Jim here. Let's take a look at another past exam question for AQA A-Level Business. This was a 9-mark question on paper 2 in 2018, and it was all about Lewin's force field analysis model. Now, in paper 2, as normal, we had a mini case study that we would use to provide the context for our responses. And the key points from the case study were as follows. It was about a business called Global Airways, or GA, and we were told that managers at GA were proposing new pay levels for new cabin crew joining after a certain date, a consequence or the aim of which was to reduce costs so that they were better able to compete against increasingly aggressive price cuts by rival airlines. Specifically, we were told some information about Appendix G that was referenced in the question, as we'll see in a second or two. We were told that the income elasticity of demand for GA's flights, or YED, was plus 1.5. So don't forget, with YED, we do take account of the plus or minus, so plus 1.5. We were told that, the forecast for the incomes of GA's target market, target customers, were likely to fall by 2% over the next 3 or 4 years. And we were also told that in terms of the proportion of GA's staff or cabin crew that were unionised, that had increased to 65% recently. And that kind of information would be really useful when it came to answering the question. So let's take a look at what the question was. Here we go. Analyse one driving force and one restraining force in Appendix G for the proposed change to the pay levels for cabin crew, 9 marks. Well, clearly, this question is about Lewin's model, isn't it? Lewin made this distinction between driving forces, forces that drive the need for change, and restraining forces, forces that resist or try to prevent change. And if you remember, Lewin's model basically said if the driving forces are greater than restraining forces, change is possible. Conversely, if the restraining forces are too powerful, change may be very difficult, perhaps even impossible to achieve. But anyway, the question was about driving and restraining forces, and we had to analyse those in terms of their impact on GA. And in particular, the wording of the question asked us to focus on the impact of the changed pay levels for new cabin crew. How many points? What was the range or the scope required here? Well, the question was explicit, wasn't it? Analyse one driving force and analyse one restraining force. So that's clearly an indication that here we need 2 points, don't we? One driving force, one restraining force. And that's the obvious way in which to structure this response. Well, should we have a look at my response? You may want to pause the video and have a go at maybe planning one or both of those 2 points yourself. Maybe have a think about how you might interweave the application from the case study, or just join me now as we have a look at my 2 suggested points. Well, I think the obvious place to start is the driving force, and looking at the data in Appendix G, it's clear that the driving force is going to be the data on YED. So my paragraph or point would start like this. A driving force is income elasticity of demand, YED. Full stop. We're using the PCAN approach here. That's it, full stop. Now all we need to do is to explain how and why that might, in the context of case study, how and why it might impact as a force for change based on the pay levels for cabin crew. So let's read through. Appendix G indicates that demand for GA's flights is sensitive to changes or sensitive in changes in passenger incomes. A YED of plus 1.5 suggests that a fall in passenger incomes of 2% in the next 3 years would result in a 3% fall in quantity demanded. So we're applying the 1.5 to a fall in incomes. We do need to take account of the percentage change. A fall in incomes would suggest a reduction in demand. So we applied the data. Okay, how does this impact Lewin's model? Why does this turn it into a driving force? Well, this might result in an even larger fall in sales revenue as GA managers are considering cutting ticket prices. This will drive the need to reduce operating costs of GA Why? Well, since many of GA's costs are fixed, such as pilot salaries and aircraft leases. Managers will therefore be under pressure to implement change, you could say drive change, that reduces costs in order to remain competitive and sustain profits. So there we go. That's a driving force, isn't it? The fact that incomes are expected to fall, therefore demand is expected to fall, and that revenues may fall even further if they cut their prices. Well, let's flip it over now and consider. Oh, sorry, hang on. Let's just quickly highlight our exam technique here. So there's our P in pecan. A driving force is YED, full stop. And in red there, I've just highlighted how I've tried to interweave the case study into the response. So in some cases, I've used the data to explain the impact. So I've manipulated the data to suggest a 3% fall in quantity demanded. And I've also used a bit of such as seasoning there to show some of the costs that are fixed. And therefore, that's why this YED data is a driving force. We need to respond to it. Having said that, let's now move on to the restraining force. Well, the obvious data that was left was the unionization data. So let's have a look. A restraining force is increased or increasing unionization. Full stop. Let's now explain how and why that might be a restraining force. In other words, a force that may resist or prevent change. So Appendix G indicates that union membership has increased this year. More than half, so I'm manipulating the data, brackets 65%, more than half of cabin crew are now unionised, perhaps because of the recent proposed changes to pay levels. Cabin crew may therefore feel that they have greater bargaining power in their negotiations with GA managers over pay levels, and maybe, not will be, but may be more likely to act together and take strike action to resist the proposed changes if they can't negotiate a satisfactory pay deal for the new cabin crew joiners. Just to develop that how and why a little bit further. Why is that a restraining force, a resisting force? This increased resistance from unionised crew will make it harder for GA managers to implement the proposed changes as they stand. And I think that's an obvious point, isn't it? A greater unionisation, in theory, makes those cabin crew employees better able to negotiate. They have, in theory, more bargaining power. Therefore, that's a restraining force. And again, I've just highlighted here the exam technique being used there. Nice short P, first sentence up to the first full stop. No analysis and application. Just keep it really short and simple, and then interweave the data from the case study into the response. And hopefully, taken together, those 2 points would enable me to get a level 3 response, maybe 8 or 9 out of 9.